I wanted to just mention a few studies, specific studies that really illustrate perfectly what I'm trying to get across. And they're best illustrated by some studies that I've done with Dr. Su, who was also one of the residents at the same time as Dr. Hesse and Dr. Duran. And basically, Su and I, first of all, for any of you who know Dr. Su, you have to listen very carefully, because when Dr. Su speaks, there may only be 4 or 5 words, and they're all meaningful. So you've got to hear what Su says, because his emails are even shorter. And he doesn't even sign them like, once in a while I get a bye, B-Y-E, bye, Su. But usually it's just Su. So he had a little patient over there that he had heard me talk about this type of disease in the past, and he thought maybe he had a patient with Rett syndrome. And Rett syndrome hadn't really been described before in Honduras, and so he sent me pictures and a little case history, and we ended up getting the blood up to our genetics center, and sure enough, and this is a few years ago now, remember Rett syndrome was just diagnosed for the first time ever in the world, 1998, 1999, and so this was back in the about 5 or 6 years ago, and basically he wrote up this little girl and reported the first case of Rett syndrome in Honduras. And that's when we learned Rett syndrome used to be totally under the autism group, but now that you really get into the mechanism of autism, it's outside the autism group. It should be its own group. And the neat thing about autism, about Rett's, is that as we look closer and closer at the mechanism of Rett syndrome, it really looks like methylation, and altering someone's methylation may be therapeutic for Rett's. And there's currently a funded trial in the United States right now on Rett syndrome and the use of folic acid. So people are going, why do the genetic studies? You can't do anything about it. And all those things. And of course, genetic counseling is one thing you can do with genetic studies. But I think the most important thing is we are moving into genetic therapy. It's not necessarily gene therapy, but it's genetic therapy. Because when you're learning these mechanisms now, the next step is treatment. And we just aren't going to stop at the genome. We need to go beyond that. And that's what we're talking about.
Esperamos de que esta conferencia les haya servido para que tengan un mejor aprendizaje y para que también puedan detectar este tipo de enfermedades en pacientes o en familiares que ustedes tengan cerca. Mi nombre es Rafael Serrano, soy estudiante de medicina del 6º año en la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Honduras y miembro de la Sociedad Universitaria de Neurociencias.
Hemos presentado Avances en Salud, con los últimos conocimientos de la ciencia médica hondureña al servicio de su salud.